Hello and welcome to The Week That Really Was with John McGregor and Sarah Ryan for this week ending the 21st of March 2025. It's been a big week. Dominated, as many weeks in Irish politics are, by Conor McGregor these days. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about calls to silence him and others on the grounds of their toxic masculinity. We'll be talking about it's 5 years this week since COVID-19 arrived on our shores, and we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about Elon Musk saving the astronauts, and we'll be talking about a new TV show that is dividing opinion. But first of all, Sarah, how are you doing?
I'm fine. I don't mind saying on the podcast that we're here late than normal because I forgot my charger and had to drive all the way back into town to get it. So pretty tired. Sorry.
That is true. So we're recording this very late at night. So let's call it The Week That Really Was after dark. Conor McGregor went to the White House and made quite the impression. You and I haven't talked about it at all. I am going to hear your take on it for the first time starting right now.
My take on it is, I think, a take that quite a lot of people have on it, which is that I would prefer a different messenger. But the points he made were valid to a lot of people. The sentiments he expressed were real, felt by a lot of people. I think Conor McGregor, and I know people are going to come at me in the comments for this, but I think Conor McGregor disgraced himself during that trial. And, I appreciate it was a civil trial and it wasn't beyond a reasonable doubt. It was on the balance of probabilities and all of that. But I'm just actually going to steer away from that for a second and talk about the fact that I think Conor McGregor disgraced himself by there being absolutely no dispute about the fact that he was had a pregnant wife at home and was off riding other women and carrying on. And I think that's conduct unbecoming of somebody who should go to the White House and speak on our behalf. Notwithstanding that, I think that what he was saying was true. I think it resonates with a lot of people. I think a lot of people liked to hear it spoken. Like I said, I don't like the messenger, but I like hearing things that I hear from people who are afraid to speak out loud, said aloud on such a big platform.
I was, as everyone knows who listens to this podcast, I was disastrously wrong about Donald Trump in 2016. And I remember exactly why I was disastrously wrong about Donald Trump. I was disastrously wrong about Donald Trump because when I first was becoming aware of politics sort of in my mid to late teens, the big story at the time was the Monica Lewinsky thing. And I remember that American Republicans and conservatives really didn't like that Bill Clinton was doing things with cigars and a 20-year-old in the Oval Office and thought it was disgraceful. Correctly thought it was a disgraceful abuse of power and all the rest of it. And I thought in my naivete that the same people who were really annoyed about Bill Clinton and the 20-year-old intern would probably take a dim view of a candidate who went around talking about how he could grab any woman by the pussy. Those are his words. I'm not going to censor them. I thought, that's probably going to sink Donald Trump. Didn't. And I'm saying that because I agree with you about the McGregor rape trial thing. I wrote a piece at the time saying that even if you believe he is innocent of any wrongdoing, even if you think he, it was all consensual, he still behaved like a terrible human being. And not only because he had a pregnant wife at home, but also because clearly he went into a bedroom with this woman and she emerged from it with black and blue. And I don't care if that was all consensual. If you do that to a woman, in my book, you're a jackass. That's my view. That said, moralizing over on this, I was taken this week by the number of people who, much like the Trump thing in 2016, where they were like, we no longer care about his personal morality. We no longer give a flying F about his personal morality because he's saying things we want to hear. I was struck by the number of people in Ireland, primarily, I think, from kind of working class, annoyed backgrounds who were saying, yeah, we don't give a shit about that, mate. He's saying what we want to hear, and that's good enough for us. Now, I think those people are still in a minority in the country, and I think McGregor will have an enormous problem breaking through with kind of middle-class folks. And if you're a Gript,
I don't think that's ever going to happen. But I think I think you're oversimplifying something. I think that And that's the trap. And I think that a lot of people do it. You're saying, I thought that people would care about what Donald Trump said, and then, they didn't. And I thought that people would care about. It's not that they don't care. It's that they care about something else more. So if I'm sitting at home, it's very possible that I think that that Donald Trump or Conor McGregor, whatever is, whatever name you want to say, and he's wrong and he's this and he's that or whatever. But ultimately, I care more about the thing he's saying. It's not that I don't care about that Donald Trump or what Donald Trump might say. I just care more about something else. It's not either or. Do you know what I mean? They just care more. And Donald Trump and Conor McGregor have something in common, is that they appeal to people who feel like nobody cares about what they have to say or the things they think or the things that matter to them. Like I said last week, not that they don't care about what Conor McGregor did. They just care more about this immigration, what the future of Ireland. They just care more.
And I'll be honest, I think that's flawed thinking. I do. I think conservatives were right when they used to say character matters in politics. Because I think if somebody is going to treat a woman in that way or treat other people with the kind of disrespect that both of those men showed, Donald Trump is on tape and Conor McGregor has a court finding against him. So it's pretty strong evidence. I'm going to treat women in that way, or indeed treat other people in their lives that way, then they'll treat you, the voter, that way. That's what they will do.
First of all, John, just to hold up, like what Conor McGregor did and some locker room talk by Donald Trump 25 years ago are not the same thing.
I wasn't saying that they were, but they're in the same family. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, look, if you and your 15th cousin twice removed are in the same family, come on, like.
I don't agree with you on that. And bear in mind, Donald Trump has also been found liable in a court, and people will dispute it.
Civil court of sexual battery, which equated to smacking someone on the arse.
He has been, both of these men have been found liable for sexual offences in courts. That is the reality. People are, I know already the listeners and the viewers are siding with you and they're shouting at me, but that is the reality. Like, that is the reality. And I'm not making the point. I think you're correct when you say,
and Godzilla is a lizard.
I think you're correct when you say that people are thinking other things matter to them more. But if you're a Gript subscriber and you read the email I sent out to you this morning, you will know that I think that one of the big differences is that the United States is not a snobby country. Like, if you are a rich guy from Queens, which is a pretty working class area of New York, for those who don't know, and you have an apartment that's plated with gold, and you have your name plastered across buildings, and you used to drive around in limos with blondes with big boobs, and you are generally sort of a little bit vulgar with your wealth, the Americans don't mind. Whereas here in Ireland, I think there is an immense middle class snobbery towards kind of the working class lad done well who drives around in a white limo with a bunch of girls in the back seat. And I think that is one of the things that Conor McGregor misjudges about Ireland. I think if you wanted to sum up the middle class case against him, or the Dublin 4 case against him, it would be, and these are not my words, this is not my views, I am saying this is what I think his problem will be. It will be those people in places like Dunleary, Terenure, Rathmines, certain parts of Cork and Galway who will say, no class, he's got no class. And I think that's ultimately his problem.
But I don't think I think we're way, way, way in advance of any conversation about electoral, potential or anything like that. I mean, Conor McGregor's not going to get the nomination to run for president. It's not going to happen.
No.
So it's irrelevant whether people in Ranelagh or Rathmines or whatever. His political career, for want of a better expression, is this. This is it right now happening. You're seeing he's using his platform to make a political point to, we'll say, run a campaign against the government. And, whether you like the message, whether you like the person or whatever, you couldn't say anything but that the campaign he ran against the Irish government this week was pretty good, pretty effective. I mean, he embarrassed them. He called them out. He got into one of the highest offices in the world, with one of the most controversial people, and he shook his hand and he got to say the things he wanted to say about Ireland. if you're measuring that as successful or not, I would say that was pretty successful. I don't think we ever even had, he'll never have to worry about voters around that. We're never going to get that far. The question is, at the moment, he's running a campaign that is somehow making people feel like their, issues are being said aloud. And I would say that whatever about Conor McGregor personally, whatever, that's a massive, massive indictment and failure of the government. The government has created this. They've created Conor McGregor in this current iteration of Conor McGregor. And they've made him still be somehow valid despite all of the things we heard, despite all of the things with the lady that took him to court and all of the details that came out about it, that he's still somehow a viable option as a spokesperson for a lot of people. And that's the government's fault. That's what, years of gaslighting and years of calling people names and calling the electorate who didn't agree with you names has achieved. Conor McGregor. That's it.
Well, they did get re-elected, Sarah, like, in fairness. But Conor McGregor, and also for the record, Conor McGregor says he's running for president. That's what he says. I mean, I have no reason not to take him at his word. He says he's running for president. He says he's going to get elected president. He says he's going to deport all the foreigners and he's going to whip the country back into shape. I agree with you that is not going to happen. Well, he says it's going to happen. He says that's what he intends to do. I think we have to take him seriously. But on that point, I want to make a point. I want to get back on the side of our poor listeners and viewers who for 3 weeks now have basically been going, Sarah, you're kicking his ass all over the place. You're making all the good points and McGurk, lefty liberal. First of all, on this show, somebody has to play devil's advocate. Otherwise, we just sit here going, you're so right, Sarah. Somebody has to play devil's advocate. But,
what's wrong with that? Everyone just says you're so right, Sarah.
You've not been the same since Perrins was on this show. When she came on and kicked my ass, and you've just been kicking my ass ever since.
I didn't know it was an option. She made it look so good.
I want to make this point. I don't know why Conor McGregor isn't on the Late Late Show tonight. This is Friday. No, I do know. I'm saying I don't know for rhetorical reasons. The Late Late Show on Friday night, tonight, if you're watching this podcast or listening to this podcast on the day it goes out, is having Rosie O'Donnell on. Rosie O'Donnell, the American comedian who Donald Trump famously hates, who says that she has emigrated to Ireland to get away from Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump made some mean remarks about her in the White House on the 12th of March when Micheál Martin was over there. So the Late Late Show is going to have her on tonight to outline her grievances with the American president. Very, very predictable. But isn't it just telling that you've got a guy in McGregor who, whatever you think about him, has reached hundreds of millions of people worldwide this week. I mean, some of these tweets posted by Elon Musk and others, videos of him talking, reached audiences in excess of 100 million. Isn't it just like telling that no one would ever consider for a moment the possibility that the national broadcaster would have him on its flagship show and interview? Like,
well, I don't have any problem with the national broadcaster not having someone on who's been subject to a case like he was and was found guilty. I don't have a problem with that. No,
I do. I do. See, we're flipping roles now. We're flipping roles. Now you're going all woke. I absolutely do. Look, the guy has been found guilty in court. There's a finding in court against him. I mean, are we really saying that no RT show would ever have Michael Lowry on, who's had multiple convictions? Of course they would. This is a guy who has intervened in politics in a major way, who has made a major impact on the national debate. The Taoiseach has had to respond to him. Taoiseach has had to respond to him. Various opposition leaders have had to respond to him. Now, I think if the national broadcaster is interested in debating issues of interest to the nation, have him on. Ask him. Put it to him. Like, Conor, you say you'll deport people if you're elected president. Under what constitutional power will you do that? And if he can answer the question, great. And if he can't, well, tough. But and maybe he just wouldn't answer the question. Maybe he'd just go on and say, look, RTE, you're a bunch of jokers and you're gaslighting the people. And wouldn't that be entertaining? I tell you what, get more bloody views for RTE than Rosie O'Donnell
would. First of all, Rosie O'Donnell, I mean, I will give one thing to Rosie O'Donnell, that she accidentally provided my favourite comedic line in my entire life in politics, which was uttered by Rosie or by Donald Trump about Rosie O'Donnell when he was in his first debate for the first American presidential election. And I think it was Megan Fox's
Megyn Kelly.
Not Megyn Kelly. I always do that. Because of Fox News. She said, "You've called women pigs, tramps, whatever." Lists off all this stuff, and he just interrupts her and goes, "Only Rosie O'Donnell." And it still to this day, I can remember spitting my drink all over the place in my living room and lolling for about 25 minutes at just the cruel brutality of that line, and so well delivered. But anyway, I think that the fact that you're talking about how Conor McGregor should be on the Late Late Show to debate this. Yeah, like, okay, I think he'd be annihilated in 15 seconds probably, with a few hard questions about how this and how that, and like actually his fundamental misunderstanding of what the brief of the president actually is and the powers that the president does or does not have, for starters. But also, I think it's a good demonstration of how, there is a sort of a lacking there, and it's probably partially media construct and partially not, of people who speak on those issues getting the accurate platform. Like, there are people, who are worthy of sitting on the Late Late Show and talking about these issues that are elected. Like, what about Peadar Tobin? What about Michael Fitzmaurice? What about Carol Nolan? There's people in Leinster House who have, but Carol Nolan's a good example. She's a woman in politics. She's not, she doesn't have the mainstream views, whatever. Like, do you know what I mean? There's other people, like, choose your heroes and all that. Like, there's people who can speak articulately about these issues that don't have to be the guy who was, found guilty in a civil court of rape not so long ago.
Okay, fair point. We'll move on. We've done 15 minutes on this, which is longer than I intended to do on it, because I did want to get to the kind of angle on this that broke today. Today being Thursday, you're watching this or listening to us hopefully on a Friday or over the weekend. Fine Gael TD Joe Neville, newly elected for Kildare North. I've spoken to Joe in the past. Lovely guy, a lot of time for him, good local representative, all the rest of it. He says we need strong action now against toxic masculinity to deal with the kind of idolization of Conor McGregor. And he didn't mention Andrew Tate, but he was talking about other influencers online. And we all need to work together with the internet companies and the social media companies to crack down on this sort of stuff now altogether, because this toxic masculinity is getting out of hand. I mean, I praised Joe a second ago because I think he's more than capable of debating his opponents, but why do you think he wants to silence them, Sarah?
Well, first of all, I just think that kind of screams of, there's a topic in the news and I'll just throw it and I'll press release and see if I can get some publicity for myself without any real thought to it.
Well, congratulations, Joe. Your publicity is here.
Yeah. I just think it's garbage. I think that there's always been, like, there's bad guys out there, and that's all true. But the idea that, like, toxic masculinity is on the rise, I mean, I think masculinity is on the decline.
Well,
so like, and the idea that there's that toxic masculinity, like, I used to say this a lot on the podcast and I haven't said it in a while. Tell me you've done no real thinking about something without telling me you've done no real thinking. It's when you spout out garbage like this about toxic masculinity and whatever. With all due respect, like, it's never been better time to be a woman. Like, of course there are problems and there are different issues, whatever. That's always going to be the case. The idea that this is kind of growing, like, of course there's groups of people, like misogynistic men on the internet who talk to each other. I'm sure there's loads of really anti-men women as well. But, like, I just think, and not to, again, or reiterate the point that I make all the time or whatever, but the same person who's lecturing us about the rise in toxic masculinity will be calling us names next week because we don't want cock and balls in the changing room with our young daughter. So spare me. Do you know what I mean? It's such garbage. It's woke posturing. It's virtue signaling. It's playing to the gallery of other people that you think, and it's the absolute lack of courage to say, most men are decent. There's bad guys out there. There's bad women out there too. Like, that's it. Like, Conor McGregor today, like, there's 150, it's like, it's Conor McGregor. But for every Conor McGregor, there's 200 or 1,000 10,000 guys out there who listen to this podcast or who don't listen to this podcast, who go to work every day and who pay their taxes and they bring up their kids and they do whatever, and they're just normal guys, whatever. Toxic masculinity. Give me a break. What about toxic performance art by politicians who haven't got if they had a new, fresh idea in their head, it would die of loneliness. So they just spout out this fucking garbage.
Yeah, there you go. You always set me up for the old short clip that's on social media for the podcast every week.
Well, don't put the F word in it.
We might. Your fans will love that. They love it. They love a bit of it. But I wanted to talk about toxic femininity a little bit because I think what he's getting at. I don't know how ordered my thoughts are here, so I'll just say. I mean, one of the things that I always enjoy, I kind of chuckle at, is when you read these people. They're generally on the left, or they're kind of like centrists, and they're well-intended, and oftentimes they're women, and they're kind of saying, we have to understand the appeal of Andrew Tate to young men. I'm sitting there kind of going, the appeal of Andrew Tate to young men is very, very simple. Here's a guy who is rich, successful, and in his own view, and I'm not saying this is genuinely the case, but as he presents it to the world, irresistible to women. That's it. And he's like, you can be like me. You can be rich, you can be successful, and you can be irresistible to women. Now, there is no young male in the planet who is heterosexual who does not harbor fantasies of being rich, successful, and irresistible to women. But we have delegitimized that ambition. So there is a reason why young boys play with Action Man and like Batman and like successful footballers. And it is because all those characters have similar characteristics. They are kind of alpha males. There's a reason you like James Bond. Guys like James Bond. Why? It's because he's successful, he's an alpha male, and women fall at his feet. And that is who most young men. Yeah, most young men, I think, and tell me in the comments if you think I'm wrong, want to be that. And Andrew Tate is one of the few people in the world, and I want to put on the record, I think Andrew Tate is a revolting scumbag for many, many reasons. But he is also one of the few people in the world who openly says to young men, it's okay to want to be rich, successful, and have loads of girls, which you all want to do anyway. And then they look at Conor McGregor. What is Conor McGregor? He's rich, he's successful, and legitimately or illegitimately, apparently women are falling at his feet as well. And they say, and Conor McGregor then also tells them that traditional masculine things are okay. So what is McGregor saying to young men? He's saying, fight for your country. Our country is under attack. Fight for it. Be a man. Stand up. Fight. It's a very raw, traditional, old, testosterone-fueled definition of masculinity. And I think that is what the centre and the left find toxic. That it is not dumbed down. That it is not Timothy, what's his name? You did the French dweeb with the curly hair. Or something. Yeah, Timothy Chalamet masculinity. And that is the problem. And the problem is, I have been watching for the last week the TV show on Amazon, Reacher. Have you come across it?
No, I know what it is. I've never watched it.
Yeah, my wife is suspiciously enamored with Reacher. I just don't think there's enough stuff like that. Basically, role models for men who are manly, masculine, and at the same time, overtly testosterone fueled and sexual and get the girls and all the rest of it, but also kind of half decent. That has been kind of stamped out because we've replaced all that with kind of, you've got to be a really sensitive guy. And at the same time, Sarah, this is where I come to toxic femininity. Those boys who are watching Andrew Tate kind of saying to them, you should be dominant, you should go out there, you should get the girls, and you should treat them like shit because that's what they want to be treated like. So they flip off Andrew Tate, and then what do they open? They open a whole string of girls who want to be famous on Instagram, kind of going, call me daddy, dominate me, come to my OnlyFans. I'm Lily Phillips, I'm having sex with 1,000 guys. There's a toxic femininity that goes along with it that actually reinforces the message of guys like Andrew Tate. Am I insane?
No, I think you're, I don't know. I mean, I think you're absolutely right in one way. I think we've told these boys that the worst thing, this is the generation of boys that we've told them that the worst thing you can be is like male. and that you should be, I don't know, like almost like you should be apologizing for being a boy. And I think that the result of that is that they are lost, they're confused, they don't know, who are you supposed to be? Like you're just told everything about your existence is wrong. How are you supposed to, who are you supposed to be? How are you supposed to exist? And so they find people like Andrew Tate because they're confused and they don't. And he says things that maybe feel like they might be, you know what I mean, mean something to them. It's confusion. It's really sad, and it's been a terrible time to be a man or a boy, and this is the result.
Terrible time, I think, in particular to be a young boy. I think it's okay if you're my age and you're married and you've got a job and you're kind of settled in life. But I think it's a terrible time to be a kind of a teenager or a guy in your early 20s trying to find your way, unless you are, gifted with hereditary wealth and great looks. I think there's a lot of guys out there who are a bit lost at the moment. That's my impression. Talking to some of them, I'm not going to pretend I talked to lots of them. Talking to some of them, I think it's the case. And on that topic, have you seen the scandal around this new Netflix drama called Adolescence, which features a 13-year-old boy who apparently stabbed somebody, and they take you through the whole case and trial and background of the story. And there's a massive online controversy with this because the young boy in question is white, and some people are saying this is just doesn't represent us and all the rest of it. But and other people are saying it's kind of a scaremongering, or it's an attack on young boys. What do you make of it?
I'm not surprised. I think, well, I haven't seen it, but I've seen the commentary and seen that it's just basically a kind of a woke journey into, young white males bad, everybody else good kind of, thing. I'm not surprised because that's what sells. And apparently there's a plan for it to be discussed at Parliament because it's so good and so close to the bone and whatever. Having not seen it, I can't comment on the exact detail, John, but I will tell you that, like we've just said, I just think it's more of it. Andrew Tate's are, leading like the Pied Piper, all these boys and all these men into this, and no question of accountability of the, toxic femininity or the toxic kind of environment that has created these kind of people. But let's have another movie where we make out. It's just a bit tired. I don't know.
Well,
I'm getting really tired of the kind of, getting really tired and weary of the whole, bashing men, young boys, they need this training and they need that training and they're this and they're that and they love Andrew Tate and Conor. I'm just getting tired of it.
Well, I haven't seen the show, and I'm not going to air opinions on a program I haven't watched. I will watch it, and maybe we'll talk about it. Maybe we'll talk about it next week or on a future podcast when I get around to watching some of it. But I will say, today, I think it was RTE Drive Time put out a tweet of the topics that they will be talking about on their show. And item 1 was, should adolescence be mandatory viewing in schools? So apparently they've decided it's woke enough that it should be mandatory for your children to watch it. So here's a young white lad that you shouldn't become like. I will say I don't like this racial angle. I don't like this, he's white. Because I think it's a generic attack on young blokes of all races and backgrounds. And I don't really see the point of racializing it. I don't really see the point. Maybe that makes me a wuss, but I just don't see the point. I think that obviously there are problems with violence in society, but I mean, one of the most high-profile ones recently involved a girl killing a trans-identified male. The death of that poor kid in England, whose murder was plotted by a young woman. That doesn't fit the narrative. So just move along. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, we may come back to this adolescent show in a couple of weeks when Sarah and I have both gotten around to watching it, or one of us has at least, and we can talk about it in more detail. We do want to mention it. That's an issue because some people have been talking to us about it. So what did you make of my groveling apology to the readers this week for my getting COVID
wrong? Well, as we discussed off the podcast, we would sometimes get comments from people who want us to discuss COVID and everything that's gone with it. I think it was very brave to say that you got it wrong. And I think that nobody else has done that. This is just complete radio silence from most other journalists about how, things were done, or how things might have done, or how truth might have been spoken to power at key moments, etc., etc., etc. So I think it's what the readers would expect from Gript. So I think you did a good job.
Yeah, well, I regret one thing, which is that I kind of think I almost overdid it. Not that I'm not sorry. What I wrote is correct, but like, obviously I got some people kind of going, you should be ashamed. And I felt like going, well, hang on a minute. I got it wrong for like 6 weeks at the start because I sort of saw the rationale for lockdown at 6 weeks at the start. And I thought, well, look, they've got to protect emergency services, right? So you don't want a situation where...
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think there was in 0 to 6 weeks, I think there was very few people, and people will, you know what I mean, like say in hindsight now, oh, they should have done this. But I think in those 6 weeks, there was very few people coming out and saying we shouldn't be doing this or shouldn't be doing that, because nobody knew.
There were some. The aforementioned Miss Perrins, for example, who's an article on Gript today, she wrote a piece on March the 18th, 2020 on her other website, Conservative Woman, in which she said, this is a terrible mistake that will condemn children to years out of school, crashing the economy and others. There were some. She was one of them. There were a couple of others. But you're right in general, there were very, very few. And to be honest with you, I can forgive myself that first 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Where I think, and I want to make, for the record, like I went on national television in, I think, September of 2020 onto primetime and absolutely had it out with them on national television. I was on News Talk multiple times during the pandemic saying the restrictions are insane, we should lift them. And on various other media platforms. I was one of the few anti-COVID voices in the media, and I'm proud of that. What I'm not proud of, though, Sarah, is my cowardice at times during the pandemic. Because even though when I was on the television and I was railing against these rules, I was saying it's insane that we have to buy an €8 meal. It's insane that we have to wear masks outdoors. It is insane that, all these things are happening. I was still complying. And I think of people like, a person I'd like to give a medal to for her conduct is that, do you remember the Cork grandmother, Margaret Buttimer, who refused to wear a face mask and then she got sentenced to 90 days in prison? Do you remember that?
Yeah, vaguely.
Yeah, people have some people have forgotten some of the insanity that went on. Margaret Buttimer, perfectly normal. Never been in trouble with the law before, never been in trouble with the law since. She just said, I'm an autonomous human being. I don't want to wear a face mask outdoors on my own. I'm not doing it. Put me in jail if you want. And they did. They put her in jail for 90 days. And I am ashamed of myself as somebody who had a media outlet and a platform that I didn't stand up and say, good for you, Margaret Buttimer. More people should do this. Instead, I kind of kept my head down. We might have reported it. But like, there's stuff like that I look back on where I think I really, really should have done more. And I think people in general, even those of us who were saying we oppose a lot of this insanity, I think sometimes it's very easy to sit back and write about how it's insane and actually do nothing. And I think I'm a little bit guilty of that, and that's what I was apologizing for. Certainly wasn't saying that I endorsed bloody lockdown for the whole time, because I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a lady whose name I can't remember now being interviewed this week talking about how there should be a COVID inquiry, but it shouldn't have any power. And I mean, I just don't think we're a good country at reflecting on our own behavior, learning lessons. I mean, our political establishment is consumed with the phrase lessons will be learned, but we never actually learn any. And I think that you're right. In the first 6 weeks, I think there was a small amount of people, fine, that were against it, but nobody really understood what was happening. Nobody really knew. And I think people were willing to kind of accept to a point the initial wave of lockdown, we'll say. And then after that, things just became sort of absurd. And I think that there are things that happen there that are scars for people. I know people who had deaths during that time unrelated to COVID. The scars of the funerals not being able to be funerals, the scars of, maternity hospitals and women like myself, I've said it on the podcast, being alone when they're losing babies, and all that went with that. And women just being alone for childbirth or the majority of childbirth, all kinds of things. big and small, and just old people being left, a country that said that the point of it was to protect old people, but we kind of abandoned them and they were left alone. And, just there's a million stories. There's a million stories of the consequences of how we got it wrong and the effects. And, it's not, I think it would be more forgivable if there was an acknowledgement of it. And so I think that what you've done, is seems like a small thing, but it's not. It's a big thing. That I think that we could start to recover. Like, it's funny because I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and I was saying, sometimes you just, and I don't think it's just me because I've had friends say this as well. Sometimes you just forget entire chunks of that period. Like, and I don't know what that phenomenon is, but like, it's like it's not, obviously not PTSD, but it's kind of a weird thing. And so I think that people we're it's not fully unraveled yet. Like, I was stunned the other day, or this week, that it's 5 years ago. It feels like 2. We lost all this time and we just went back to normal. And at one point I remember thinking, it'll never go back to the way it was before again, though, will it? And in some ways it has, and in some ways it really hasn't. Like, for restaurants, for hospitality, for loads of people. Some people just lost their entire businesses. I know people who had wedding related businesses were just gone overnight. Lots of bad shit happened to people. They're angry, and they're right to be angry, and there's no acknowledgement. And, we might have an inquiry, and, nobody's expecting anybody to be beheaded. But we should learn something. We have to actually look at what we did wrong or right or whatever.
My theory on this is that the PTSD explanation is very close to the truth, actually. I think there are an awful lot of people in the country who, and I'm not blaming them for this, I'm not attacking them for it. I'm just saying the reality, because I know some of them, who went along with it right up to the end, who wore their masks, who took all the vaccines, I'll come back to that in a moment, who did their social distancing. Some of them even wouldn't take the masks off when it was publicly allowed to take the masks off. And a lot of them kind of look back on that with a little bit of embarrassment. And I think there's a recognition in the country at large, we all went a little bit mad. But the problem is that because we all went a little bit mad, there becomes this motivated reasoning kicks in, which must be, it was worth something. When you lose everything that you have lost, it's sunk cost fallacy, isn't it? When you've gone through that thing of burying your father, and my father's still alive, thankfully, but you've gone through the thing of burying your father with 3 other people there, and his neighbours can't come in. When you've gone through the bit where your aunt dies in a nursing home with no one around her, and they're holding signs up on the window saying she passed peacefully. When you're going through the fact that your kids have missed a whole year of school, you look back on that and you realize that at the time you were supporting it all, you have to tell yourself that something was achieved. Because if nothing was achieved, if that was all for fucking nothing, then, then what are the consequences? So I think one of the reasons we're not having a COVID inquiry worthy of the name, and why there's no real public outrage about that, is that people don't want to find out that it might all have been for nothing. That would shake their identity to the core. And I think an awful lot of people are in that boat. I want to say one thing, because I obviously wrote that thing and I got the predictable wave of people saying, what about the vaccine? You took the vaccine, you aren't writing about the vaccine deaths, you aren't writing about the vaccine illnesses or the vaccine injuries or any of that stuff. And I want to address that, Sarah, if you don't mind, head on, which is this. People have been writing into Gript now since 2021, when the vaccines came out, saying the vaccines are killing people. The vaccines are not safe. The vaccines have caused a bunch of injuries. I know a person who was injured by the vaccine. I know 16 people who were injured by the vaccine. I've read all the data on how the vaccine has injured people. And every single time we have, without fail, replied to those emails with, can you put us in touch with the person who was injured by the vaccine? Can you get them to send us their medical records? Can we please follow up with the person who you're telling us suffered a vaccine injury? And every single fucking time, they don't want to talk, or I actually can't get in touch with them, or, oh, I actually just read that online, or whatever. And I'm saying, find me more than 1 or 2 confirmed cases in this country of serious vaccine injury, and then we'll talk. Because you're all telling me all these people are dropping dead. Find me one.
Hold on. Like, vaccine injury is a real thing. I mean,
I'm not saying it's not, Sarah. I'm not saying it's not. That's not what I'm saying.
All fair, I can name people who I know. I mean, what's your definition of vaccine injury? I mean, we know that there was people who suffered myocarditis from the vaccine and were told not to get a second shot.
Yes.
I can tell you people in my family that's happened to. Like,
we have covered those cases.
Who got 1 dose of vaccine and were told absolutely no more vaccine for you, and have never got a COVID vaccine.
No, but hang on a second, because it's an important point. We have covered those cases. There's an established link between some of the vaccines and myocarditis. We covered that. There was an established link, for example, between the AstraZeneca vaccine and some blood clotting issues. We covered that. In fact, there was a death, at least one death, in fact, probably multiple deaths related to the AstraZeneca vaccine in the UK, in particular, a BBC journalist based up in Newcastle who tragically took it and lost her life. And there were multiple others. There were defined incidences. Sorry, we had a technical issue there for a second. Hand on heart, Sarah dropped, her recording stopped, so we're going to have to pick up where we were going. But what I was saying is, there are established vaccine issues, and if you search for these on Gript Media, you'll find that we have covered them and covered them extensively. What I am talking about are those people, and they are online and they are everywhere, who explicitly say the vaccine is killing, dozens of people. It's responsible for the excess deaths. It is a massive, massive issue, and you are not investigating it. And I am saying, we have tried to investigate that. We have followed up your leads. We have asked you for, when you say this person died of the vaccine, we say, can you tell us more? No, it's not there. And if you can find me, and this is an open invitation, you can find me people who back up the case that you are making online relentlessly every single day. Send them to me, because if you read our coverage of the vaccine on Gript Media, we have covered it in substantial detail. And we have reported everything that we can possibly stand over reporting. So I'm just addressing that section of the audience, because it is a persistent thing that gets brought up again and again and again. And people accuse us of acting in bad faith, or not looking for stories, or not wanting to investigate, or anything like that. We've looked at it, and we're just not going to tell you lies. Like, if you're telling us that there was the young man down in Waterford, for example, there was a lengthy inquest into whether or not he died as a result of taking a vaccine. That is one of 2 that I'm aware of in Ireland where it was a major factor. There was another one over in Mayo. In neither of those cases, ultimately, was a finding made that the vaccine contributed to the death, although one might say that verdict could have been offered, I think, fairly in both cases. That would be 2. But there are no other cases that have certainly been drawn to our attention, or that make a severe link between the vaccines and the kinds of claim of mass public injury and mass public dying that the people who talk about this all the time say. And if you want to fight with me over that, fight with me about it. But I'm telling you, send me some evidence that contradicts the position I've just set out. That involves actual real people and real cases, not I read this online.
Well, I think... Okay, John. I think that if there is... I mean, I think that the people who talk about this don't just talk about deaths. They talk about increases in certain types of, cancers, different things like that. Young people getting certain types of cancers. I think it'll be borne out in data ultimately.
Yeah, but I think I don't think they do that. I think they look for a problem and then go, it must have been the vaccine. I'm sorry, there was a period there a couple of years ago. There was a young man in a particular part of the country who, very tragically, his girlfriend broke up with him. And as some young men in these situations do, he took his own life. It was reported in the newspaper that he had died suddenly. And his picture was everywhere from these people online saying, another vaccine death, another died suddenly. I think there are people out there, and his family had to read that. His family had to go through that. They were coping with the tragic loss of their son in circumstances that you can imagine no family would ever want to go through. And there are people online who just like, so I don't buy this whole kind of like, oh, we have seen an increase in certain kinds of cancers, and that must be the vaccine. Well, maybe it was the fact that we shut down cancer screening in this country for 2 years. Maybe it was the fact that you couldn't go and get your mammogram or your cervical check or your, you know, whatever the male equivalents of those things are that I thankfully haven't reached the age for yet. Like I think you go, when you start, I mean, I'm reminded of the old joke. Did you ever hear the joke about the JFK conspiracy theorist who goes to heaven? And he gets one question. He says, God, will you just answer me one question? Tell me honestly, who shot JFK? And God says, it was Oswald. He was in a tower. He acted alone. He shot JFK with one bullet. And the conspiracy theorist pauses for a moment and goes, Christ, I never knew it went this far up. Like, I think if you get to a point where you believe the thing, no evidence is going to convince you that you're wrong. That's how you, if you want to identify yourself as a conspiracy theorist, ask yourself, what evidence could I be shown that would prove me wrong in my own head, and where I would go, actually, I got that wrong.
What's that expression? As fanatic as somebody who can't change their mind and won't change the subject?
Yeah. That's about it. Anyway.
We'll see. I mean, you're going to get a lot of people upset with you for saying that, but look.
Look, here's the other thing. Let's wait on this. Your mate, Robert F. Kennedy, is in charge of the US Department of Health now, is he not?
Yes.
So people should stop shouting at me. People should say, if there's a vaccine conspiracy, Robert F. Kennedy, noted vaccine skeptic, has said these shots are dangerous for many, many years. He now is in charge of the US Department of Health. He has the full power of the US federal government behind him. If there is any evidence of widespread vaccine deaths, let him bring it forward. Are we going to say that RFK Jr. is a victim of the deep state as well? Like, bring the evidence forward.
No, give it some time. You never know. What evidence would it take for you to admit that you were wrong?
That's very, it's very, very simple. Like, I would need to see a series of deaths with very similar symptoms that were clearly linked and by doctors and medics to people who had taken the vaccine. And this is the critical point. I would need to see that the deaths in that grouping were substantially higher than deaths in a similar grouping who had not taken the vaccine. I would like to see, if you're saying, for example,
there is no similar grouping because most people took the vaccine.
No, that is not true. The population who didn't take the vaccine is more than large enough worldwide for there to be a particular sample. Like, there just is. And indeed, all these, for years, it was the conversation was, the anti-vax, we're going to be the unvaxxed, we're going to be the ones in the pound seat when all this is dead, finished and done with. There's particularly in the US, there's an enormous grouping of them. But I would need to see evidence that, for example, heart attacks you were more than twice as likely to die of a heart attack if you took the vaccine than you didn't. Telling me that 200,000 people who took the vaccine got a heart attack is not evidence. Telling me that 200,000 people who took the vaccine got a heart attack out of a group of 20 million, whereas only 50,000 people who didn't take the vaccine out of a group of 20 million didn't get a heart attack, then I'd say we've got a systemic problem because you've got two controlled groups with vastly different outcomes. That's the kind of evidence I want to see. And it's not there. No one has presented it. No one has collated it. RFK Jr. now has the opportunity to do it. Let's see what he does. And
I mean, it's like that, but there's things you don't know, but there's things that are, the vaccines cause autism thing. Like, I mean, just a casual, just bog standard day-to-day researcher like myself. I remember about a year ago sitting up one night and researching the different vaccine protocols of different countries loosely. And then what was the country with the highest rate of autism in the world? And the countries with the highest rate of autism in the world are the UAE. And they don't have the same vaccine protocols as the United States. So,
sorry, are you saying that it has the highest rate of autism or the lowest rate of autism?
The highest.
So I don't understand the
You
point
look
that I
up
would suggest that
country
it's
with
not
the
the
highest.
vaccine.
Say that again.
That was no. My understanding of what you're saying is that would tend to disprove a link between vaccines and autism.
Yeah.
No,
and I don't think, and I've said on this podcast before that I think that the amount of vaccines that are being put into children in America, in particular, their protocol is insane, and I do believe that a lot of that is driven by the interests of pharma, because I think that babies in America, whether it is or isn't causing them injury, it's unnecessary that they're being injected with an unnecessary amount of inoculations for things that they will never be exposed to, and that serves some people's pockets. And I stand by all of that. But I think that, at a cursory glance of where the highest rates of autism are, the idea that vaccines cause autism when the UAE aren't giving the same vaccines is easily disproved. Autism might be a combination of factors, could be all kinds of things. I'm not a doctor, but again, like, I can hold, seemingly contradictory ideas at the same time. One is that I am very concerned about the amount of vaccines that children get. I do think vaccine injuries are possible, particularly in children who are underweight or already sick, whatever. That's a fact. But do I think that they're the cause of autism? Don't think that that's been proven or even close to proven in any way yet.
Yeah, but just on this point, like, because I often find this is kind of the straw man, and I'm not saying you're guilty of it, but like, people start off with the position that you either say vaccines are completely safe, or I'm explaining it badly. My point is, I believe vaccines can cause side effects, vaccines can cause injuries, some vaccines can have systemic problems with them, etc. I think there are too many people who start off with the position the vaccine is killing thousands of people, and then they find a minor problem with the vaccine. And I'm not saying myocarditis was a minor problem with the vaccine. It was actually a pretty systemic problem with some of the COVID vaccines. Thankfully, in most cases, it was mild. Thankfully, in the vast majority of cases, it appears to have resolved. But they will then say, this proves I was right. Or they will then say, if you're conceding that there are some problems with vaccines, they must be unsafe and we should take them off the market. And just going back to my point about RFK, there's a guy called Joseph Levado, who is the Surgeon General of the state of Florida. He has been the Surgeon General of the state of Florida for the last 6 years. He's appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis. He takes the exact same position on vaccines as Robert F. Kennedy does. He has had access to the entire medical database of the state of Florida, in which the vast majority of people were vaccinated, but about 30% of the population chose not to be vaccinated. You couldn't have a better two control groups. He has not presented one piece of evidence in that time that there was a systemic problem causing deaths or indeed serious injury with the COVID vaccines. And he's on your side. Like, not talking you specifically, Sarah, but like, this kind of stuff has been allowed to go on for so long. And then those of us who look into it get shouted at because we're not validating particular narrative. And even I can tell already, they'll be in the comments under YouTube, they'll be emailing in saying, I'm not looking at this, I'm not looking at that. We have looked at all this stuff. Just because I don't mention it here doesn't mean we're not looking at it. The evidence to back up and I'm making here the specific claim of widespread COVID vaccine related fatalities and serious injuries, that specific claim doesn't stand up. Some minor issues, sure, but that's just the issue. That's the point. Tell me about Elon Musk. You want to tell me about Elon Musk, didn't you?
Well, no, I didn't. I mean, look, a lot of people who listen to this podcast might not be aware of it because it got such little media coverage. Imagine my surprise. But Elon Musk sent one of his spaceships up to rescue some stranded astronauts that have been stuck up in space for a while. And if it was anybody else in the world, it probably would have got some kind of prize or, maybe a few column inches or a bit of praise. But it's been kind of low key. And I was one of those space nerd kids, I loved space. If I'd grown up in America, I would have gone to that space camp thing you always hear about, love a bit of space. And but also the idea of being stranded in space, pretty terrifying. And, just sent up his rocket and got them. Isn't that nice?
I'd have been nervous given the number of his rockets are blowing up lately. Now,
Well, I'd rather be blown up than left there.
I'm kidding. Don't jump. The specific rocket that went up actually is very safe and a triumph of SpaceX engineering. The one that keeps blowing up is an experimental rocket, which, if they can get it working, will be transformational for human exploration of the stars. So let's hope it stops blowing up.
Good recovery, John. Now, good recovery, because always the bitter word when it comes to the MAGA administration, always the bitter word. Even a rocket rescue mission doesn't impress you.
I'm not Shania Twain. That does impress me much. So it did impress me. I mean, look, I think Elon Musk is a phenomenal entrepreneur. I think he's a visionary. I think, I said before, I think, if you take away all of his political stuff, and I think he's still done more good than harm on the political front. Some of his stuff has been visionary. He got electric cars to work with Tesla. That's fairly impressive, given how shit they were before that.
It makes me laugh to see all the kind of wokesters now getting rid of their Teslas to give 2 fingers up to Donald Trump, or to Elon Musk and Donald Trump, because apparently climate change is fixed now, so it doesn't matter. They can go back to having other cars.
Does it not make you laugh at the same time? All the people on the right kind of going, "Well, I'm going to drive an electric car now." That one works both ways.
I don't think that's.
I'm never driving.
I don't think that's as funny, John.
I'm not going to be driving an electric car. You can take my diesel from my cold. Well, I do a petrol either, but you can take it from my cold dead hands. It's just not happening. Although your beloved husband has been trying to tell me for ages now that his electric car, actually has decent range, and I still don't buy it.
I don't know. He seems to get where he needs to go, and he spends a lot less money on petrol than I do.
Yeah, that's true. But it also whines. The engine whines. It doesn't roar. You want your engine to roar, not whine. Anyway, don't tell him I said his car was girly.
He listens to this podcast, and he's going to be furious with you.
Furious about next week. Yeah. All right, look, I think we'll leave it there. It's been a good. We argued a fair bit this week, didn't we?
Oh, I can't wait to see the comments. You're dead.
It's nothing I'm not used to. But look, if they weren't booing me, they wouldn't be cheering you. I mean, this is the thing. And can people understand professional wrestling? Somebody's got to be the heel. Somebody's got to be the babyface. No one would have cheered for Hulk Hogan if it wasn't for Andre the Giant. It's your Hulk Hogan in this situation. But yeah, you can be Trish Stratus if you want, and I can be.
I wasn't an incel teenage boy, so I wouldn't know any of this stuff. You were just sitting down watching wrestling.
Some of your fans will know who Trish Stratus and Lita were. They, like me, were incel teenage boys at the time. So anyway, we will leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you much for tuning in, whether it be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to us. We appreciate it. And we will be back this time next week for another good row. Take care.